Okay. Today, I'm joined by Kristin Mphahlele, a counselor, a trainer, and an autism specialist whose work spans across Africa, Europe, the Middle East, and Asia, and the Pacific. She is the director of Aurelia Autism Services and consultant to the World Bank, who has spent more than a decade working alongside families on their neurodiversity journey. Kristin's work is rooted in equity, in dignity, and the power of relationships. She specializes in practical evidence-based strategies that empower parents, educators, and community professionals, while at the same time advising schools, NGOs, and governments across the globe. Whether she's building toolkits, mentoring teachers, and shaping inclusive policies, Kristin bridges systems thinking with deep community engagement. Her mission is clear: to create sustainable, meaningful change that ensures autistic and neurodivergent children have the support they need to thrive. Kristin, welcome to Beyond the Box.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
I was so excited. My colleagues couldn't wait to have you on this blue chair because you have been traveling the world. Where have you been for the past few months?
I recently returned from the Republic of the Marshall Islands. So a very remote island, atoll, country that is in the middle of the Pacific.
Okay.
Yeah, very close to Hawaii, between Hawaii and the Philippines.
Oh, that's a very good point of reference. I have no idea where that is. But what were you doing there for 2 months?
So I was consulting for the World Bank. I worked within the Ministry of Education, consulting the public school system in autism and neurodiversity, helping increase capacity in teachers to help and support autistic and neurodiverse learners in Republic of Marshall Islands.
Wow, that's interesting. So that's at the government level.
It's at a government. So I was working for, advising governments in the Marshall Islands.
On the strategies they could use.
Everything and anything to do with autism. So because it's quite a low resourced setting, they don't have many resources or expertise in autism and neurodiversity. So it was my job to come in and look at the systems in place. What is available, what's not, what are the strengths, what are the challenges, and what can we implement to help and support autistic individuals and neurodiverse individuals in RMI. So it had to do everything from, the diagnosing pathway, the referral pathway, how do children access the screening system, what that looks like and what can be provided to help increase that support and increase the capacity of teachers to help support autistic individuals. Their education around special needs is also not as extensive. So I come in, I do training, I help create the system, I try to implement a referral pathway. We try and increase autism and understanding awareness in the communities. We try and break down that stigma because that also exists. And we work with stakeholders to see how we can increase that support.
Oh, that's an amazing work you're busy doing there.
Yeah.
It's just spectacular to see that your expertise, obviously, because you've worked across the world, it's not a surprise that you were invited by the World Bank to come and use your expertise there. And I can't help but wonder, how does South Africa compare?
Well, how does RMI compare? So RMI is Republic of Marshall Islands. Look, when I am here in South Africa, I sometimes think, we still have a very far way to go. But in South Africa, we have more services for autism than the rest of Africa. And when you come to a place like Marshall Islands, you think, wow, there's absolutely nothing. And then I think, South Africa, we are trying. We have many more services in place than we did, let's say, 10 years ago. But there are still some difficulties and barriers that we have to overcome, especially considering the cultural layers that we have in South Africa.
Sure. Our viewers at home, I needed to give you an idea of what's coming today. I know we went straight into with Kristin because of her amazing trip somewhere closer to Hawaii. That's a very good reminder for me in terms of where you've been. Yeah. So you'll be very happy to know that today we are going to unpack the top 5 burning questions that South African parents are Googling about autism. These are the questions that carry fear, confusion, but also hope. So, Kristin, we're going to start with the top question that parents are asking on Google. And the question is, how do I even afford the autism therapy? Because the costs are so high. From what I'm hearing, it ranges between 900 to even 1,500 per session. Which is quite a lot.
It is a lot. It is a lot. It's, of course, depends on what kind of therapy you do. But the financial burden that parents face is one of the biggest mountains, one of the biggest hurdles that they have to overcome, because as parents, you want the best for your children and you want to do as much as possible. Yeah. But then you are faced with these fees. How do you support your child when there is, 1,500 rand bill for one session?
Yeah.
So, yes, I think there are different options for parents. And I think it's important for parents to know what their options are and the different kind of opportunities that they can also access. I know Googling, you don't know where do you start, what therapy is best for your child. So let me go through the different options. Firstly, you're able to contact NGOs or nonprofit organizations who would be able to provide you with free parent trainings. So this would be Autism South Africa, Autism Western Cape, depending on the area where you are. Some of them also do online training, like webinars. So you can just understand what autism is. Sometimes their training workshops are specific, just what is autism, or it could focus on behavior, communication, and so on.
And that by far is better than Google.
That's already better than Google, especially because it's relevant to the South African context. You don't want to be Googling things that are necessarily in America, because different approaches, and you want to look at something that is a strength-based approach that focuses on a child's strengths and nurtures their passions and so on, and not necessarily trying to fix the child, because we want to stay away from those kinds of information. So there's a non-profit organization.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, the organizations like Autism South Africa, maybe Autism Western Cape, they actually offer practical support and techniques on what parents can do once they find out their kids is autistic.
Yes, so they will be able to provide some parent training. They also provide some training to schools, and they provide many other services as well, such as school support. If your child is struggling with schools, they can help you look at how they can assist your child in the school environment, or provide just support for the school. Then you do get clinics at universities that are able to provide some therapeutic services for children. These are usually run by students that are supervised by qualified professionals. So this will be at a lower cost that you are perhaps able to access.
Is it every university?
Not all universities. Not all universities. I can't name every university yet, but I think it would be beneficial to look at the university in your area and contact them to see, if they do provide something like this. Then through the public hospitals, after you receive your diagnosis, if you go through the public system, they would refer you to some speech and occupational therapy at the hospitals. So at the public hospitals, which you will be able to access. The difficulty with this, though, is that you might get a 30-minute session with a speech therapist once every few weeks. And that is not necessarily as beneficial as what we would like it to be. Of course, it's better than nothing.
A typical session is probably about an hour.
30 minutes.
Oh, okay.
Generally. A general one? Yes. It would be an hour session once, maybe 2 or 3 times a week, depending on what kind of therapy you do. Occupational therapy and speech therapy might be once a week, but if you do more early intervention or some specific therapies, that would be more likely to be at least twice a week. Some therapies would advocate for the more the better. So that would almost be every single day, sometimes be a couple hours a day. This is when it gets very expensive, when you are doing maybe 3 hours every single day.
That's hard.
If you are able to afford it, that's fantastic, because you are able to have focus sessions, right? But that also doesn't mean that that is the only option. For us, for example, at Aurelia, we focus a lot on parent coaching, because for us, it's important for parents to feel empowered and to not solely rely on expert therapists, so that they are able to help their child in the everyday environment at home. So we would do, number one, we have online training, okay, because we want parents, no matter where you are in the country, to be able to access information. So especially those in a little bit more rural communities that aren't able to go to a training session, we want you to be able to access training online so that you understand autism, understand your child, and to be able to implement strategies at home and understand what you can do. And then there are parent coaching. So whether this is in person or online, we can help coach the parents how to use everyday activities to help with growth and development of your child, how to engage your child, how to increase the moments where they are learning through every day. So, for example, I worked with a mother in Oudtshoorn, and her child at the time was around 2 or 3 years old. She didn't have a diagnosis yet, but she suspected, which was fantastic. But she contacted us even though she didn't have a diagnosis, and she already wanted to help start her child, start helping, So what we did was we did online coaching. So we would put the camera there, the phone camera, and we would start playing. We would start reading. We would start packing away dishes. We would hang up the washing. And in those moments, I would coach her and say, okay, pause, ask for this, maybe ask which color does she want to play with. And in these moments, we would be coaching and engaging the child and their interests, because that means active engagement. And we would be then coaching in these little moments of how to create moments for communication, how to, work on academics even, and so on. And
it's so powerful.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. Continue, because I wanted to say that's where you want it to be.
Exactly.
Empowering the parent.
Exactly.
Because the cost now, the cost of weekly or multiple days a week becomes less significant.
Exactly. And one thing I also want parents to know is that you don't need expensive therapy and toys to be able to promote growth and development. You can use the everyday environments. It's just about knowing how to do it. If you are putting schedules and visuals into the home, you are constantly using these moments as a learning opportunity. So as I mentioned, some therapies say the more the better. But now if you are implementing this into the everyday, you can do it from morning to evening while still having fun and playing and making sure that the child is comfortable in the home environment. So, yes.
Wow, that's so powerful. And I just like how you literally saying, you Aurelia Services put the power back in the parent's hand, which is where you want it, because this parent lives with the child on the daily. But also we want to touch, Kristin, on your experience. I know you worked with marginalized communities previously. What are some of the key lessons that you've learned during that time that you think can kind of help parents in terms of accessing some of these topic services that are available?
So again, it was an opportunity to show how you can help and support people without these expensive toys and therapies. The biggest thing from working in these communities was the power of community, and the power of just families and support that you have. I think parents feel so isolated and alone, and in these communities, because it's a bigger household, and
there's aunties, there's uncles, there's even neighbors, that's your mother,
everyone. It's incredible the support that they provide the child, and with them slowly educating them around what autism is. And they don't understand that it's a neurodevelopmental condition. They just know, they think differently, they act differently, and that's how they then go and educate the rest of the community. And it was quite powerful to see how through that gentle education, how autism knowledge has increased. Of course, the difficulty with that is there is a lot of stigma,
Yes.
and a lot of cultural layers around, whether the child is possessed or things like this. So those are the biggest things that we tackle. But yeah.
I love how you are unpicking this, Kristin, because that's a topic that comes up over and over again. We had Dr. Liu, who is a neurodevelopmental pediatrician. We also had an author, Wendy, and she also talked about this, right? And we had our radiologist, Mamko, she also talked about this. But I like how you put it, that gentle education, because, they're entrenched knowledge and practices that can actually be harmful to the child. But I like that your approach was gentle education, because those family members become advocates of society for the rest of the community.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
And you can't go into the community and say, it's a neurodevelopmental condition and this. It's words that don't connect with them, because they're not interested in these medical jargon. We want to explain to them what it's like for the autistic individual. They hear the noise a little bit louder than what you hear the noise. They need a little bit more attention, and they experience the world in a different way, and they communicate differently. You understand exactly what they're saying, but they might not use verbal speech, and that's completely okay.
Yeah. That's amazing. So what do you say, Kristin, to that parent at home who's watching and feeling so guilty because they just can't afford this weekly therapies?
Firstly, it's completely understandable. I think it's so important to just don't put so much pressure on yourself. And you as a parent are your child's first therapist, you are their first teacher, and just use the everyday environment. And most importantly, just play with your child. Listen to them, let them guide you, let them show you what they need, and use these moments to increase the learning opportunities. Every single day, you can be singing songs and you can be reading books, and you don't need these expensive toys or these expert therapists necessarily. Of course, if you can get these kind of therapists to come in and help guide you, fantastic. But if you aren't able to, then at least just, use the time with your children and engage with them. Try not to fix things necessarily, but listen to what it is they are communicating to you. What is that behavior saying to you? And help and support them, and use their strengths and use their interests, and just have fun along the way.
Yeah, so reassuring to get guidance from the expert. And, so I'm hoping you will get to connect and learn a little bit more about how she can empower you, how her organization can empower you at home. So you're less anxious and you're a little bit more comfortable in supporting your child. So Kristin, the next point is, now the parent is happy, the therapy sorted. Maybe they now also know how to run this, these interventions themselves at home. And now they're wondering, where does my child go to school? Do I take my child to a mainstream school or a normal school, as we would call it? Or do I take them to a special needs school? And so all of this can be really stressful for parents. How should they go about it?
Okay, so schooling is a big topic because, of course, many parents don't know. Most parents want their child to go into mainstream schools, but that's not necessarily the best option for their children, for various reasons. So let me explain the different schooling options and how to go about it as a parent to see why some schools might be better than others.
Yeah.
So firstly, of course, you get the mainstream schools. So these focus on the national curriculum and they focus more on academics, right? So the mainstream schools, their teachers would not necessarily have education in special needs and how to support special needs. And especially within the schools, they might have limited support for special needs children. The ratio would also be much higher between teacher and children. So technically, according to South African policy, special needs children aren't technically supposed to be turned away from mainstream schools, but of course it happens regularly. Now, if you put your child in a mainstream school, they are supposed to be able to access certain services, educational, therapy, or counseling, but some schools aren't able to provide that, and your child will have a very difficult time to access the curriculum. And also, if they aren't able to accommodate for his certain special needs, their sensory needs, your child might maybe exactly they might not be able to access the curriculum. We then get the special needs schools. So the special needs schools, to be able to access a government special needs school, you need to have an official diagnosis. Okay. You need to have an official diagnosis, and your diagnosing doctor will then place you on the waiting list. Okay. So only your doctor can place you on the waiting list. An occupational therapist or speech therapist can motivate for you to be on the waiting list, and then it will be on a provisionally, and then that will be reviewed, but the doctor will place you on the waiting list. These waiting lists are very long, and you can wait sometimes several years to access these special needs schools.
And it's very heartbreaking, I must say, because we do, in our line of work, we do meet parents that say, my child has been waiting for a year, now they quit, they stay at home.
I've met parents that have waited for 8 years.
Yeah, can you believe, and what that does to the child themselves.
Exactly, exactly.
So that's in the public system though.
That's the public system.
Yeah.
The private system would most likely also have a waiting list, but it would be much shorter. Depending on the area of which you live is also dependent on which waiting list of the school you'll be placed on. So it's based on the area in which you live. So the special needs schools don't focus so much on academics and focus more on life skills and, all the other things. And the thing about the special needs schools, though, is that the teacher-child ratio is much less, right? So
your child will get more attention.
Your child will get more attention. They'll also be placed on something called an individualized support plan. So this is their kind of learning pathway that will help them in the school. And they would be able to be given accommodations, within the environment based on their specific needs. So yes, the waiting list is really long, and you would get specialized attention in the school specifically for your child. One thing I want to say to parents is that if your child is on the waiting list, don't wait for the waiting list to contact you to be able to be put into a school. If you can access a different school while you are on the waiting list, do that. Don't wait for years first to access the special needs school.
Give your child in any school that's available.
Any school that's available. The reason for this is if you are on that waiting list for the special needs school, you will then be contacted to go and do an initial assessment at a school. After that initial assessment, you'll be put on another waiting list to go do a screening and observation, a 2-week screening and observation in that special needs school. The thing is, though, if you were contacted by the school and you go do your screening and observation, it still doesn't guarantee for your child to be able to access that school, to be placed into that school. Your child will still have to maybe be referred to a different school. Now, this is another important thing, is that if your child is not placed in that school, it is that school's responsibility to refer you to a more appropriate school. And many parents don't know this, and often their children aren't placed in the school, so then they don't know where to go from there. But according to law, they have to refer you to a more appropriate school.
That's very nice to know, because it means, because as a parent, you're now anxious, my child is in a waiting, and now you're trying to think where you can go. But the law puts the responsibility on the school to give you the next option.
Yes. Whether that's mainstream or special needs, they need to refer you to a more appropriate school. So even if your child is in a specific school and they say, listen, we can't accommodate your kid anymore, we think that you should go to a different school, it is that school's responsibility to refer you to a more appropriate school.
Kristin, before the parents can access therapy, and maybe even education or school pathways, they need a piece of paper that proves that this child is actually being confirmed to be neurodivergent, right? And it can be very confusing when one look at the public pathway to try and get this piece of paper. And it can also be quite slow in the public health system. But the private sector approach is quite pricey, although it can be really fast. Talk to our parents in terms of which pathway can they go through? And I know cost has a lot to do with it, but please unpack it for us.
Sure. So firstly, many parents sometimes approach us and say, is it necessary to get a diagnosis? I know my child is autistic, or I know my child is ADHD. Why is it important to get a diagnosis? As you mentioned, to get that piece of paper, if you want to access these special needs schools, if you want to access certain accommodations within mainstreams, it's important to have that official diagnosis. So I usually advocate for a diagnosis because it is that paper that will gain you access to support. Now, it doesn't mean that, you have to put a label on everything.
Yeah.
It just means that it will allow you to get the support that you need. So there are the two pathways, the private and the public. So the public pathway is long and tedious for many parents. So the first way that you would access this pathway is you will go to a general practitioner. You would say that I am noticing some things for my child. I think there might be some, difficulties that it's experiencing. And then that general practitioner, or they might flag a few things, and then they would refer you to a specialist. They would then refer you to a developmental pediatrician at a public hospital.
If your child is smaller.
If your child is smaller. Or it could be a psychiatrist or psychologist.
Okay.
So then you are put on the list, and it is then the process of going through several assessments with these doctors. That pathway can be sometimes up to 2 years. I've heard of parents that have had to wait 2 years to get a diagnosis.
In the public health.
In the public health system. So what's so difficult about this is you can't be put on that waiting list for the schools if you don't have that diagnosis yet. Or you can't access the government, the speech therapy and occupational therapy in the hospitals unless you have this diagnosis.
So that piece of paper is critical.
It is. It really is. Especially if you need to access these services. So then you get the private options, of course. The difficulty with private, as we mentioned, is the costs.
Am I correct in saying it can go up to like 15,000 or slightly more?
I guess it depends where you go, but I would say a couple of thousand, definitely. You will find some psychologists that offer it at a lower cost. The problem is that it requires a couple of sessions. And if you, let's say, go to a psychologist, 1,500 rand one session, it can go up to 4, 5, 6 sessions. So that is the difficulty. Although if you go that route, you might be able to get a diagnosis within a couple of weeks. So it's tricky. I think that some psychologists also might not have, unfortunately, the expertise that are necessarily needed to do a diagnosis. So there are limited psychologists or psychiatrists that offer diagnosis, and that's why there's also waiting lists to access it in the private sector. So one thing I would say for parents, if you do go for a diagnostic assessment, is just come with information. Come with as much information as possible. Write down the concerns that you've had for your children or your child. What are some of the behaviors that you have noticed, and bring with any reports from the creche or schools that can help make sure that the assessment is comprehensive, it's concise, and it's as efficient as possible.
Absolutely. I like that you touched upon the fact that psychologists can do the diagnosis, right? However, not all of them. So can you maybe just clear it up for the parents? Who in South Africa can do a diagnosis?
Sure. Okay. It is the developmental pediatricians, psychologists, and psychiatrists. But psychologists, it could be educational or clinical. So these are the main diagnosing, let's say, specialists, that are able to provide a diagnosis. I would do some research though and look at those that specialize in diagnosing neurodevelopmental conditions rather than just approaching any psychologist or psychiatrist, because you do need extra training to provide certain diagnostic assessments.
Sure. Wow, interesting. I'm going to move on to something that it's a bit more emotional because I know you've worked with parents across the world on this journey. And what we're hearing, most parents are feeling isolated and alone. The journey can be really difficult.
Yeah.
And some parents actually Google on the internet where are the support groups for autism parents in South Africa or in Western Cape or any other province. And how do I educate my family about what autism is? Because some people have received a lot of punches from ignorant family members who don't understand. What do you say to those parents that are feeling alone and isolated? How they don't know how they can get the family members on board?
Yeah, it's so difficult because, parents, you're not alone.
Yeah.
There are so many parents out there that are going through the same things that you are going through and that are also experiencing the same stigma and difficulties, going into the communities or even just going shopping, with their child. And every parent wants the best for their child. They want to take them out. They want them to enjoy this world, because their children are capable of so much.
Yeah.
But they are limited by the beliefs of other people, So I want to say just find your tribe, research. Again, it's unfortunately, yes, Google is difficult, but if you go to the schools, if you're trying to access the schools, if your doctors, hopefully, I'm trying to work with the doctors to give them a list of people that they can contact, but, or support groups or just resources. But usually also the non-profit organizations, Autism Western Cape and South Africa, they have a lot of resources on who are the organizations in the country that provide support groups and so on. Some are free, others are not.
Yeah.
Again, but I would say also bring your family members to these support groups. At Autism Western Cape, for example, I know that they usually have family day and sibling day to extend these services to other family members as well. Many family members come and they say, I really struggled in the beginning. I said that, the child isn't autistic, the child doesn't have ADHD, like try and fix it. And then through that gentle education, they started to realize, actually, there is nothing to fix. It's only about supporting.
Sure, it's amazing the way you've unpacked this and why this is so close to my heart, because I've got a family member who's raising a neurodivergent child and they are out in a very rural province and I remember having a conversation with her where she said, I don't even know where to take my child to play and who my child can play with. And so the fact that Autism South Africa and Autism Western Cape have particular events and activities. And Autism South Africa has, if you go to the website, you can find out where is the nearest support group.
Yes.
And I'm sure you would want to also kind of emphasize on this fact. Stay away, parents, from the group that says we are going to help you fix your child or we're going to pray it off.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Just stay away from anything that says curing, fixing.
Yeah.
These can be so harmful, don't go into this thinking that there must be something to fix or, it's not only going to be a difficult journey for you, but it's going to be extremely difficult for your child. Growing up thinking that there's something wrong with them, something that needs to be cured or fixed. It's extremely harmful and it has so many negative impacts, lasting impacts that go and last into adulthood as well. It's all about supporting, even the diagnostic assessment has changed. We don't talk about severe or less severe autism anymore. We threw away those labels.
Like level 1, level 2.
No, we've got level 1 and level 2, but they represent support needs. Do they have high support needs or low support needs?
Not high functioning, low functioning.
Throw that out the window.
This is very educational.
Yes.
It helps you to be more sensitive.
Exactly. Because also what determines you to be high function, really, if you aren't able to communicate, but with verbal speech, let me just add, if you're unable to communicate with verbal speech, but you are able to use an AAC device, or different tools to communicate, you're still communicating, you're just not using verbal speech, right?
Yeah.
If you have certain sensory needs and can't access certain environments, but you then are able to use noise cancelling headphones, then you're able to access that environment. So, just by providing certain supports, you are able to then help what needs you have and to be able to, go into the environment with less challenging challenges that you might experience.
Yes, just staying on the support group, Kristin, maybe you can unpack for our audience at home. What is the role of a support group, right? I'm curious about that, but I also want to know what is a particular script that a parent could kind of start preparing when they want to inform the family member who's maybe skeptical. How do they go about it? I mean, also considering the context of South Africa.
Yes. So firstly, support groups are there for parents, right?
Yeah.
I think when you are navigating this field and trying to do the best for your child, sometimes you neglect yourself, and that has detrimental effects not only on yourself but also on the environment in your child. It's so difficult to navigate if you don't fill your own cup first. And support groups are there to help guide parents, not only in certain counseling and providing a safe space for them to share their stories, but also to ask for support from others, and ask for what strategies worked with you as a parent, parent to parent, what can I do? What helped you? What can help guide me? Or I'm struggling with this with my family member. What worked for you? There's no perfect way to approach these things. It's very dependent, each family to another. But I would say that the most important to, when you are talking to your family members is just, help them understand that your child experiences the world in a different way. They are learning in a different way. They communicate in a different way. And that doesn't mean that it's wrong. It's just different. So when they are explaining these things to your family members, it's a condition that they are born with. It's something that they will always have. It's not something that people want to get rid of. It's just a different way of experiencing the world. And that can be beautiful too. We can learn so much from autistic individuals and neurodiverse individuals as well.
Sure. I love that you touched on the strengths and something that we do here at Kids Innovate Africa on the quarterly, which I am so grateful. I haven't mentioned that Kristin has been a contributor to this important movement. So our Celebrating Neurodiversity event, which runs every quarter and brings together parents of children that are neurodivergent. It also brings together experts like Kristin, who share practical tools and strategies to help parents manage at home. But most importantly, in the context of support groups, it's a safe space where you can hear from other parents what worked for them. And some of the questions you may not feel comfortable to talk about with your family members and friends and maybe even colleagues, but this is a space where you can talk about things like that. But how important is finding a tribe for your child? How important is that?
It's so important, right? As a parent, you need support, and as children, you also want support. You want to feel like you belong.
Yeah.
If you also feel isolated, if you feel judged, if you feel ridiculed, it's can have detrimental effects. We see that depression and anxiety is very high amongst autism, especially when you reach like adolescence, especially when you go into the high school. And suicide rates are also very high amongst autism, unfortunately. And that's because of, them not having their tribe, them not having their support and constantly having to deal with other people's judgments. So it's important, and that's why we are advocating for inclusion. We want schools to be inclusive so that not only for autistic individuals, but for other learners to also learn how to accept children who might be a little bit different.
Absolutely. And I like that you're touching on that, because that's also one of the things we do through our Celebrating Neurodiversity initiative, and thanks to the SAB Foundation. The neurotypicals are able to share with the neurodivergents. And neurodivergents, we actually have a story of a few stories actually, but I'll tell you about one boy who taught in the class about, I need to be taking my food because that's how I regulate myself. I've got ADHD. And one person said, you need to be kinder because you just don't know what people are going through. This is like a grade 5 student talking about being on the spectrum, because it can be really hard. So I like that you talk about the importance of educating the others so that the child feel like, I'm understood, I'm accepted.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And look, at the end of the day, children become adults, and these adults need to go into the work environment, and we want the work environment to also be neuro-affirming and also accommodate neurodiverse individuals. So the way that we are also approaching the work environment, we want them to be able to accommodate for different needs as well. And it starts with, the younger generation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. Thank you for unpacking that so beautifully. So now we're going to bring it home, literally. So beyond the therapy, beyond the school, beyond finding your tribe, now parents are cooking. How do I deal with meltdowns, Kristin? There's so much meltdown. I feel overwhelmed. I don't know what to do with the sensory overload. Talk to the parent at home. What are some of the best strategies they can try?
So meltdowns happen for a reason, right? Meltdowns are different to tantrums. Very important. Tantrums is usually when a child wants something, they want access to something, or they're uncomfortable and they're running away. And once they get access to that item, the tantrum would usually stop. A meltdown, though, is when there's sensory overload or just overwhelm in general. And it's important to understand why the meltdown is occurring in the first place. So what are the sensory needs of the child? What has happened before the meltdown occurs? What happens afterwards? How is your reaction towards it? And those are the things that we look at to prevent the meltdowns from occurring. So in the home environment, we need to make sure that we are looking at what the needs are of the child. Do they have a way to communicate? Do they have a way to express themselves? Do they have a way to regulate their sensory system if they are feeling uncomfortable? Do they understand their emotions? Is it a difficulty with some executive functioning skills, impulse control, emotional control? And those are the kind of things we look at to look at the meltdowns. Meltdowns are a result of the overwhelm, right? So we want to be able to implement things in the home environment that will calm the sensory system, make sure that there is a safe space for them to go to when they are feeling overwhelmed before it occurs. Notice the triggers, what is triggering meltdowns, and then we want to make sure that we are removing those triggers so that meltdowns don't occur at all. So meltdowns are preventable.
Okay. So then if I understand correctly, that's something that Aurelia Autism Services support parents with. If it's outside the home environment, in external spaces where you have no control over, you guys empower parents to know, how do I manage spaces like that?
Yeah, those are exactly the kind of things that we work with, because one of the biggest things is we want you to first understand your child. We want you to understand what their needs are, what their difficulties are, what their challenges are, and that also includes what communication methods they need to be able to communicate their needs. What are some of the ways that we can support those so that we can prevent the things from happening. So these are very specific to understand your child, understand their needs, understand what the triggers are, and then prevent these from happening in the first place.
So there's just so much you can do when you have you're empowered with knowledge, particularly knowledge from experts, because you know exactly what you need to do in terms of the interventions you need to apply. Before we say goodbye, Kristin, I would like you to share with the audience some of the important work that Aurelia Autism Services has been focusing on. I know you work with international organizations as well. And I also know you work with universities, something I'm really excited about, and I've been talking to some of our guests about. So can you share with our audience, what are those important focus areas that that Aurelia Autism Services is looking at?
Yes. So firstly, we cater to the parents, right? We make sure that we provide online training for parents so that parents can access information no matter where you are, not only in South Africa, but all across the world, especially in Africa, because we want to make information accessible and make sure that it's strength-based and also empower you what you can do in the home environment to support your child, focusing on making it practical, right? Taking the information, making it simple to understand and how to apply that. We also focus on coaching for parents. So if you are again, in a certain area, we can help coach you on how to support your child in the home environment. And then we also provide therapy. So if you want a therapist to come in, we can provide that for you. If, you don't want to necessarily do the full day kind of support for your children. But it's important for me to look at the system, right?
Yeah.
So I am working currently with some universities. We're in talks on implementing autism-specific modules within the university curriculum.
Okay, for which courses in particular?
Education, and focusing now a lot on masters in education, but teacher training. Yes, but I want to get it into the general education curriculum because I think it's important for all teachers to know how to support autistic individuals so that they are able to access that mainstream education because they don't necessarily have that kind of knowledge and education when they do go through universities. I believe all teachers need to be able to accommodate for autistic and neurodiverse learners.
I would even go further to interrupt you to say not just teachers. I told you we have a health expert.
Yes.
People who work in the healthcare sector, and particularly this radiographer, talking about how I think she's the only person in this huge private hospital who knows how to support neurodivergent individuals when they come for screening. And so the burden there, if I may call it that way, on her day off on the weekends, she has obviously made herself available. If somebody who's on the spectrum come in, call me. I don't care if it's 2 a.m. I want to be able to be there.
Exactly.
So to your point, not just the teachers.
We actually have a course specifically for healthcare workers. Because exactly for this reason.
Okay.
There are so many healthcare workers that don't understand how to support an autistic or neurodiverse individual who is coming through that door. What are the communication things that they need to be looking at? What supports can they provide when they are trying to access health? So yes, I completely agree with you.
Okay, how do people find you? How do parents at home connect with you? I know you have social media.
We do have social media. So we are on Instagram and Facebook at Aurelia _Autism Services. We also have, we are also contactable by email. So info@aurelia.global. And yes, we provide a lot of information on our social media, a lot of tips and how-tos. And we also have a lot of free resources and free webinars that are accessible at any time. So if you just go to our website, there are some amazing little tidbits, even some blog posts, around what is available in the South African context.
That is so nice. Thank you so much, Kristin. We will share this, contact details on our podcast, so you as a parent at home can know how to access some of the free and even paid resources that Aurelia Autism Services offers. Today, we've unpacked 5 of the biggest questions that parents across South Africa are Googling, from the financial cliff to the school dilemma, the diagnosis maze, the loneliness, and the everyday chaos of meltdowns. We are very thankful to Kristin for showing us that while the system is hard, there are ways forward. And most importantly, parents, you're not alone. To every parent watching this today, your child's value is not measured by therapy bill or a school placement. The value is already whole. And your love, your advocacy, your resilience, that's what will carry them forward. From us at Beyond the Box, this is goodbye. Please remember to like, to share, and to follow. Thank you.